They say nature doesn't play favorites, but prehistoric Earth clearly had a thing for nightmares. Not just the big toothy ones either. Some of its most terrifying creatures came feathered, flippered, or with tusks sharper than steel. This isn't a story about survival. It's about domination, extinction, and the monsters that nearly met us at the edge of history. If you think dinosaurs were the ultimate predators, it's because you haven't met the ones that came after. This story doesn't start with a T-Rex or end in a museum skeleton. It's a layered saga of apex predators who rose from extinction events, inherited ancient killer instincts, and rewrote the rules of hunting across millions of years. What makes this journey so compelling isn't just the size or the savagery. It's how evolution sculpted precision weapons out of feathers, fur, and bone. Terror birds didn't just run fast. They sprinted on legs designed like bioengineered springs, with skulls built to crush the life out of prey twice their size. And while they were doing that on land, Pliosaurus ruled the seas like a biological missile, its bite force turning living creatures into ribbons before they could even flee. But this isn't just a predator highlight reel. It's also a detective story, piecing together fossil clues that question everything we thought we knew. Terror birds in Europe? Smilodons surviving near humans? Bone-crushing dogs more fearsome than lions? The answers don't just surprise, they completely recalibrate our understanding of power and adaptation. You'll see how animals like the mastodon turned defense into dominance, how evolution flirted with perfection in forms that vanished far too soon, and why extinction rarely happens for just one reason. From jaw mechanics to migration maps, by the time the Oligocene epoch rolled around, the terror birds weren't playing small anymore. Paraphosaurus towered at nearly 5 feet tall and weighed as much as 400 pounds. It was less bird and more battering ram. Robust bones, crushing beak, and all the attitude of something that knows nothing in its environment can outrun it. Its beak wasn't just a tool. It was a weapon capable of turning bone to pulp with a single strike. But that wasn't even their final form. Fast forward to the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, and these birds had grown into something mythic. Names like Titanus and Kelenkin weren't just big, they were terrifying. Titanus, having crossed the newly formed land bridge into North America, brought a South American nightmare to a new continent. It roamed places we now call Texas and Florida, standing over 6 feet tall and weighing hundreds of pounds. Its cousin, Kelenkin, was even more extreme, nearly 10 feet tall, with a beak that could put a horse's skull to shame. These weren't just birds, they were land-based predators fine-tuned for obliteration. Even as they diversified, they didn't just grow, they evolved with intent. Their skulls adapted to deliver greater bite force, their legs to chase faster prey, and their senses to rival modern raptors. They weren't all about brute strength, though. Some, like Brontornis, had size that rivaled a small car, but may have leaned more herbivorous, throwing yet another curveball into their evolutionary story. But all signs pointed to a family of animals built not just to endure, but to dominate. And yet, like all dynasties, their time ran out. The narrative of terror birds isn't an isolated one. Across different ecosystems and eras, apex predators kept reinventing themselves. In the oceans, where fish, reptiles, and sharks once jostled for dominance, something more terrifying emerged. Pliosaurus didn't evolve to swim. It evolved to hunt underwater like nothing else before it. While its plesiosaur ancestors were long-necked and graceful, Pliosaurus trimmed the fat. It traded elegance for power and became a nightmare with flippers. Its body wasn't just built for speed, it was engineered for annihilation. Pliosaurus didn't cruise through the Jurassic oceans like a giant fish. It torpedoed through them, all muscle and momentum, with jaws that rayed like a manual in mechanical horror. The largest known individuals measured up to 47 feet long and weighed more than 15 tons. That's not just bigger than a killer whale. It's a floating warhead with a skull the size of a grown man's body. And it didn't just snap shut. It crushed, sliced, and pulled with a force that makes a saltwater crocodile look like it's gnawing on celery. The teeth alone told a violent story. They weren't cones or spikes. They were naturally serrated, curved into flesh-shearing perfection. But what really sets Pliosaurus apart isn't just what it had, it's how it used it. This was no reckless beast lunging blindly. The fossil record shows deliberate tactics, crippling bites aimed at flippers, controlled precision, targeting movement before meat. Some prey fossils even bear the healed scars of past attacks, meaning they escaped once, only to be hunted again. Imagine a predator so terrifying that escape doesn't mean survival, it just means delay. And unlike sharks that thrash and tear, Pliosaurus had a jaw structure built for swift, open-close mechanics, creating a vacuum that pulled prey inward before the kill. Its four-flipper propulsion system wasn't for show either. It allowed for sudden acceleration, tight turns, and long-range stalking. This wasn't a sea monster in the mythic sense. It was a sea monster in the very real, very calculated way evolution intended. But just when you think prehistoric oceans had reached peak terror, we surface back to land. And land wasn't much safer. While the oceans churned with jaws and fins, the Pleistocene plains echoed with the thud of paws, the crack of bone, and the presence of a predator that looked like it had been drawn by an artist with a taste for drama. Smilodon wasn't just a saber-toothed cat, it was the saber-toothed cat. Those iconic fangs weren't for show, they were surgical tools meant for doing one job and doing it fatally well. And yet, despite their weaponized teeth, Smilodons weren't oversized versions of lions. They were built differently, stockier, more heavily muscled, and with limbs that could pin down animals many times their size. They weren't into long chases, they didn't have to be. Ambush was their currency. When they pounced, it was game over. Their jaw could open to an absurd 120 degrees, enough to sink those massive canines deep into the throat or belly of megafauna that towered over them. As we follow this lineage through the epochs, birds that kicked like horses, marine reptiles that hunted like submarines, cats that punctured with frightening grace, another question surfaces. Where did they go? Because for all their evolutionary brilliance, none of them made it to the present. And what finally brought them down wasn't one predator or one battle. It was a slow unraveling, stitched together by climate, competition, and the cruel limits of specialization. Extinction doesn't care how perfect you were. That's the thing these apex predators all learned, eventually. The terror birds, for all their speed and skull strength, couldn't outrun a cooling climate. As forests gave way to grasslands, their massive bodies and ambush-based hunting styles fell out of sync with the open terrain. The ones who couldn't adapt vanished. And the big assumption for years was that they were simply outcompeted by the influx of North American mammals. Cats, wolves, and bears streaming down after the Isthmus of Panama formed. But the timing doesn't line up. Most terror bird species were already declining before those placental predators showed up in force. What really happened is more complicated, and way more interesting. Climate change hit hard. The lush, dense forests that gave these birds cover and prey turned into patchy savannas. Their prey dwindled. The few that tried to migrate north, like Titanus, held out longer, but even they couldn't beat the cascade of environmental stress. Fossils show they hung on longer than we thought, some even making it to within spitting distance of early human arrival in South America. Still, not enough. Then there's the Smilodons, who met their own slow-motion collapse. Their fatal flaw? Hyper-specialization. They were built for megafauna, huge sloths, bison, mammoths. When those giants started dying off, likely due to a combination of warming climates and human hunting pressure, Smilodon found itself with the perfect weapon and no target to use it on. It couldn't pivot to smaller prey. It was a master of one skill, in a world that suddenly demanded 10. Even the ultimate sea predator, Pliosaurus, didn't get a fairy tale ending. Its reign was cut short at the Jurassic-Cretaceous boundary, a moment that saw more than just a species vanish. It was the end of an entire marine empire. The cause? No one's completely sure. Some say climate shifts or ecosystem disruptions wiped out its prey. Others think it was just outcompeted, eventually, by the rise of faster, more agile predators like mosasaurs. Regardless, its dominance wasn't enough. And Epicyon, the bone-crushing dog that should have been unstoppable, faced a similar fate. As the Miocene came to a close, North America's landscape changed again. Open plains expanded, prey became faster and more evasive, and Epicion's bulky build turned into a liability. It didn't get outcompeted by cats as once thought. It simply lost the evolutionary bet on power over speed. Each extinction wasn't a single knockout punch. It was death by 1,000 changes. Shifting habitats, vanishing food sources, a temperature dip here, a new competitor there, and maybe, just maybe, the final blow was timing. These predators were built for the worlds they dominated, not the ones that followed. It's easy to admire these creatures from a distance, to see them as ancient monsters locked in time. But the truth is, some of them came frighteningly close to overlapping with us. A set of terror bird fossils dated to just 18,000 years ago has completely changed the way we think about that possibility. That's only a few thousand years before humans showed up in South America. Imagine stories passed down, the kind that eventually became legends of monstrous birds. And then there's Smilodon. Some individuals survived catastrophic injuries they couldn't possibly endure alone. One had a crippled hip but lived well into adulthood, suggesting care, cooperation, maybe even something like loyalty. These weren't cold-blooded killers. They lived, suffered, adapted, and disappeared in ways eerily familiar. But extinction doesn't end the story. It leaves behind traces. We find them in tar pits, bone beds, petroglyphs etched into stone by early humans who may have seen the last of these giants. The difference between myth and memory isn't always clear. What is clear is that Earth's past was filled with brilliance that didn't last. And maybe, just maybe, that's the part we should be paying closest attention to. So if this journey made you rethink what it means to survive, or left you picturing a 10-foot bird charging through fog, don't let it stop here. Share it. Start a conversation. Dig deeper. Because the more we understand the beasts that came before us, the better we might navigate the world we're shaping now. Prehistory wasn't a horror story. It was a masterclass, and it's still got things to teach us.